going to read straight. I'm going to read 410. I'm going to read right from the Carrera book because the translation is the same, and there is no commentary in the Satyananda book. So, 410. Since the desire to live is eternal, vasanas are also beginningless. Since the desire to live is eternal, vasanas are also beginningless. The urge to live is a reflection of our eternal nature, which is existence itself. The impulse to manifest the infinite, everlasting nature of the self is also the force behind the desire to procreate. Having children, to a large extent, fosters a sense that somehow we will continue beyond the years of our physical body. It is one of our everyday links to eternity. Asisa, translated as desire to live, can also mean primordial will. We could then understand this sutra to refer to the will of God, which continually creates out of the store of Prakriti, then reabsorbs those manifestations into the unmanifest form. The subconscious impressions, being a part of Prakriti, are therefore also eternal. So I had a hard time really getting anything from this. I wasn't really sure that I'm understanding, except that it has to do with reincarnation, that it's beginningless, the desire to live is eternal. Vasanas are also beginningless. I don't know, we take those vasanas, we take those sanskaras from one life into another, so that makes them eternal, but I'm not sure about the beginningless part. And so I read the Edwin Bryant commentary, which didn't help me, so I'm not going to read it here. It didn't help me to understand anymore. Then I looked up the one, the blog that you often look at, Micheline, and that was a little bit more explanatory, I think, so I'm going to read that, unless anybody wants to comment before I go ahead and read.
I can explain after.
Go ahead and explain now, and maybe it'll...
I want to hear the other article.
Okay, all right.
I'll explain after.
Okay, all right. Because I read it over several times and it still didn't really make an awful lot of sense to me. So I searched for something else, and this is a bit better. So this one says, these vasanas, if I'm saying that right, I don't know if it's vasanas or vasanas, lying between the light and the dark are due to eternity, and the desire to live, cutting like a sword, is of eternity. Patanjali now turns back to the vasanas or mental habits of Sutra 4.8, those colorless motive forces that have been flavored by God. Sutra 4.10 says that these, tasam, are without beginning, anaditvam, a statement often interpreted as in support of reincarnation theory. I want to present this idea in a different light. Anaditvam, or without beginning, can also be phrased as due to eternity. And I find this second interpretation more instructive. I don't see this eternity as referring to a time without beginning, but rather as pointing us back to that which our comprehension cannot contain. The limitless essence of the unnameable is such that to it no borders can be ascribed. We cannot define this eternal essence, and so we cannot search for its beginning or its end. As an old gospel tune sings, so high you can't go over it, so wide you can't go around it, so low you can't get under it. This indefinable and immeasurable, according to my readings of the Yoga Sutras, is the source of what we can become. The second half of this sutra says that the desire to live, asisa, is of eternal nityatvat. Our everyday desires are temporal, fluctuating, but this deepest desire is the primordial will, the part of us that cuts like a sword, asi, meaning sword, separating the real from the unreal. Just as our eternity-born vasanas are neither light nor dark, this deepest desire finds a space between day and night, between all distinctions. Other translations of Nityatvat include blessings and of all desires. There is a sense of fulfillment in the word. The roots of this term mean into, the, ni, there, tya, the, tvat. We then might write Nityatvat as the desire to enter into the underlying purpose of yoga practice. Only when all of our desires have been tempered by the fire of practice and non-attachment can we begin to realize the desire that cuts like a sword, separating the truth of our lives from the unreality of delusion. When this desire is given full life, our vasanas, the source of movement in our lives, can also become eternal. Sutra 410 may speak of reincarnation, but my question is this. What is to be reborn? Tradition says that we are born again and again into bodily suffering and mental and emotional turmoil. But what if we can realize another circle, one moving from eternal desire to eternal movement of life and back again? Then we will no longer see a never-ending crushing wheel of time, but we will instead experience a constant rebirth from a never-ending and sustaining source of life, flowing out and returning endlessly. So that was a little bit more illuminating.
So that makes more sense?
Well, a little bit more sense. I think that if I go back to just the basic translation, since the desire to live is eternal, vasanas are also beginningless.
So I always think of this topic, Einstein's theory, E equals mc squared. What is the squared, right? What is the unknown force? Mm-hmm. And he also talks about how energy just changes form. It doesn't go anywhere. So like when what the Vedas teach is that there's this like ever expansive and contractive universe, but it came from the depth of, it's like Purusha wanted to be able to interact with itself. Consciousness wanted to be able to interact with itself, so it expand outward. And in that, it's not that energy went away, it just expanded, it changed. So you have all of these little individual droplets that are sort of splattering everywhere. You could think of it, right? Because we always use this analogy of the para-atman, or the super consciousness, is like the ocean, and the individual consciousness is like the drop of water in the sea of the ocean. They are the same, but interchange. You know what I mean? They're separate, but they're the same. Mm-hmm. So when we can look at it sort of delineated as we have the consciousness, and then we have matter. They are, matter is sort of formed and arranged by consciousness, and they're sort of intertwined. But consciousness can exist without matter, and matter sort of like decays and falls apart without consciousness, right? If you look at the body, when the consciousness leaves it, it dies and it shrivels up and it loses its form, and it, turns into dirt in the ground and all the worms eat it. So as consciousness, the problem is when consciousness starts identifying as matter, the nature of matter is impermanent, but the nature of consciousness is permanent. So that's what he's talking about in this sutra, that there's an eternality to consciousness. But consciousness is, another way my teachers taught it to me is consciousness is reflected onto the material, in that it looks like the material. But like in the Vedas, they use this analogy of the banyan tree on the lake. So if there's a banyan tree on the edge of a lake and you see the reflection in the lake, it looks like the banyan tree, but it's not the banyan tree. It's the opposite of the banyan tree, right? It's usually reflected backwards. So in the way that consciousness reflects onto the material world, it looks like consciousness, but it's actually not. It's backwards. So they say, like, why do we feel like we're going to live forever? And then our bodies die, and it's like this huge problem. It's this huge existential crisis. It's because you are going to live forever, but there is a misidentification with the body being who you are. And when the body is due to the conditions of the material and it ends, there's a confusion that happens. So it's the same with, like, when somebody passes away that you love, there's a moment where, like, you can't understand because you feel like they're going to live forever. You know, like, everybody's, even if you know somebody's like in the cancer ward and they're, you know, they're on their deathbed, like, there's still this feeling of like, no, they're going to live forever. And there's a shock that happens when they pass. So the reason is because we're misidentifying them with their body. There is a part of them that will live forever, is what the Vedas teach, but their body is material. The material changes form according to what is influencing it. So the sutra is about sort of that impetus towards eternality, that it is a part of our nature to have that expectation, and it's normal and it's natural because it is who we are. So this is like a new thing that I've heard. I haven't heard this before, that like the whole impetus to create life. It's almost like divinity acting out on itself. It's like, if you think about Samkhya philosophy, how Purusha is influencing, or so consciousness is influencing Prakriti, which is matter. And all the time matter is expanding, and there's creation and creation and creation. It's like we are a part of that consciousness, of that higher consciousness, right? We're a drop in the ocean of that consciousness. So it makes sense that we have the same impetus to create as individual consciousness. So that, like the sutra is saying, like, you know, wanting to procreate has to do with just being a part of the nature that we feel like we are eternal. And it's almost like we're participating in bringing down more souls that are also eternal, because we're just a part of the whole karma of it. Oh, I'm good, thank you. Maybe Daddy wants to write. So yeah, if that explains it any better. That's the way my teachers taught it to me. That I think about that banyan tree all the time. And that plays on Maya, right? On illusion. Like, in order to live in the world, we make sense of it, but there's an illusory aspect to it that when we forget our true nature. But at the bottom of it, we always kind of actually know our true nature.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Were there any other questions? That there's a lot going on here, so I don't know if I caught everything that you were reading.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say I was reminded of current theories about the universe expanding and contracting when Jackie was reading that as well.
Will I go on and read the next one, because it kind of follows on from all of that? If that's okay with everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah. So 411, the vasanas being held together by cause, effect, basis, and support disappear with the disappearance of these four. This sutra examines the factors that bind vasanas to the individual. If we know what keeps vasanas operative, impelling us to take birth after birth, we can find a way to break the chain reaction of cause and effect which binds us. And then he goes into kind of explaining each word. So cause, ignorance is the root of all subconscious impressions. That's related sutras are 2.3 and 2.4 that they discuss ignorance. Effect, the fruits of our actions. Related sutra is 2.14, the karmas bear fruits of pleasure and pain caused by merit and demerit. Basis, the mind, which is the storehouse for all impressions. And support, the existence of external objects that stimulate the mind to form vrittis. Now that we know what holds vasanas together, how do we make them disappear? Ignorance is the cause for the continuing existence of vasanas and the root of all obstacles. By overcoming ignorance through meditation and samadhi, we overcome the limitations of vasanas. In Sutras 2.10 and 2.11, it says, in their subtle form, these obstacles can be destroyed by resolving them back into their original cause, the ego. In the active state, they can be destroyed by meditation. The next 6 sutras offer a fascinating glimpse into the nature of sense objects, their relationship to time, and the fact that they exist independently of an individual's perception of them.
So that kind of relates back to what we've talked about in regard to meditation. It's
right.
Like when you go through a layer, you have to like completely, right, and then let it go. And that's the whole Sankhya chart. Like when we first learn Sankhya philosophy and we see the chart, like Purusha, Prakriti, individuation, you know, the gunas and all that, the whole idea is that you start with the gross, like the earth and the water and the fire, and you have to like you have to absorb your consciousness with it, and then you're able to transcend it and go higher up the chart. So while the active creation brings us like from the top down, the active meditation brings us from the bottom back up until we are back at Atman. So they're like all these, I think that's why it takes so long. There are all these things you have to move through, sort of like getting rid of your ignorance about each layer of it.
Right. Right. I mean, if you think about the cause, the ignorance is the root of all subconscious impressions. I mean, just that could be, you could be there forever trying to kind of cut through all the threads of your own ignorance. Because I feel like as we live, build more, as we live, we create more vasana or samskaras, we create more, and so we just have more to get through and more to deal with as we move on.
This is why they say all roads lead to bhakti. Like the jnani needs to understand all of this. When you're doing Raja Yoga, the royal system, like you have to do all this, go through all the techniques, all the things. The bhakti say, like if you have devotion, then you can just reabsorb your mind back into Purusha. That you just skip all the other things. You don't even have to learn too much of the philosophy. If you're just constantly repeating the name, absorbing yourself in the name, it like supersedes everything else. They'll talk about how like sometimes people get obsessed with wanting to get material gain in this world. I think we've been through that part of the book. And like, why aren't you just focusing all of your awareness on like the highest? It's like you're wasting your time, right? Like we were talking about cities, and then they talk about like, oh, you're just wasting your time. You're wasting your prana. You're wasting your energy by putting your focus on that. Like you're supposed to put your focus higher, and that's really the point. Is trying to get us to a state of bhakti, or complete devotion. And some people just fall out of the womb like that.
Yeah. Is it like faith? Like people talk about in different religions, maybe, but having like a supreme faith, just knowing that you are divine,
Yeah, it's that remembrance. Like I heard something recently that every sign that occurs to you is trying to remind you that you forgot that you're divine. And the sign is divine, and the world you're living in is divine. The lessons are divine, and like it's all just like sort of a pool of divine, and we just keep forgetting over and over and over again. So those who could remember that transcend it all. That's the idea. It's easier to let go, right, of your body if you think that it's just a drop of the divine. If you like truly believe that, if there's that deep surrendering, but that's really like a certain constitutional type that can easily do that. And it depends on your karma of what kind of mind you come into the world with, right? Like we talked about how like in the womb, our children have these personalities, and if some people have done this work for so very long in so many lifetimes that they've developed a certain mind that very easily can just latch on to that idea. But other people need to have all the information and understand it thoroughly. Yeah, I'm the same way, before they can really like get down with that. Like I'll go to some of these bhakti classes, and if I take someone, they're like, whoa, what the hell is going on? And it's like, if you don't understand the deeper aspects, and you have that kind of like that scientific mind, like you need to understand why, you can't get down with any of it. But if you understand like the esoterics, but for some people, they don't need all that information. It just makes sense to them, and they can get down with it. And like some people will look at them and be like, oh, you're ignorant, you just need you just need something to lean into. But actually they're more advanced than everybody else. Spiritually. I'm not talking about the people who like use God as an excuse to do harm. I'm talking about those people who are like surrendered, they're really surrendered. They're like in the flow state all the time, in that surrender.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who has 4 kids, and I look at her and she's able to like not worry. She's a really good mom, but she has this ability like to not worry, and it's all that's what it is. Like she has so much trust that they're being held. Like they'll be at my house for when we were doing sleepovers and all that, and like she doesn't check in. And they're fine, like, and they're totally awesome little beings, and she has this really, really huge trust and surrender and a higher thing that her kids are taken care of. She doesn't have to like be there hovering.
That's awesome.
It is awesome.
And that's for ourselves too. Like he was talking about fear, I think, in the last sutra you read, right? There was some part where he was mentioning fear, I think. It's like, if you trust that whatever is coming for you is meant for you, and you chose it already, and like everything's already happened, which is like, these are realizations that I've definitely started to experience as I further along the path of meditation. I definitely didn't believe that for a long time. And then you have these experiences and you're like, oh, okay, everything's happening at once. Like it's already happened. There's really only so much control that I actually have. People keep asking me like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Your business is closed. Like everything is so crazy in the world. And I'm like, for a little bit, I was like really having a hard time with like understanding what my path was in all of it, because I feel like it was laid out before me. This was supposed to happen. What is my role in it? And that's a way different attitude than other people that I'm friendly with whose businesses are closed, and they're just like so angry, or they're like, they're lashing out at their loved ones, or like, they're thinking like, why me? This should have been this way. This should have been that way. And it's a different sort of attitude than the yoga teaches us. It's like, there is a tapestry. That's what my teacher told me. There's a tapestry. On one side, it is a damn mess. On the other side, it is so beautiful, and there's a plan, and you just have to trust that. You have to trust that, like, we all decided to come into this. There's some kind of work or karma we had to do. And like, it gets to the deepest part where it's like, even death is involved in that plan. Like the body ending and bodies becoming, and war and famine, and like, it's a really hard pill to swallow, but that's like the bhakti path. It's like a surrender to, this is the will. of like the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean we're just sitting around and not acting. It means that when you act with the idea that everything I do is in service to the divine, then you don't create more karma. If you think I'm acting to gain something for myself or to avert something or to do something to somebody else, then we get stuck in the cycle of karma. We create more karma. But like if we want to transcend karma according to the bhaktis, it's every single thing you do is an offering to the divine. And then you step right out of the cycle. Very simple. Keep God in your mind all the time. Dedicate all of your things to God. Because if it's all God anyway, like the Jews say, we're like in the dream of Hashem. We're just living in the dream of Hashem. If it's all God anyway, then you're like literally just tapping into what is by doing that. But that takes a lot of stress.
Right.
You mentioned people who said to you, aren't you freaking out because of your business, et cetera, et cetera. So during COVID, there was a coffee shop in Valley Stream called Sip This, which was really much more than a coffee shop. It was a huge community center. It had a huge following.
I know Sip This. Yeah.
It was, well, it went out of business. And, I think everybody was concerned about, I was especially concerned about one of the co-owners, Stephanie, because she was there a lot and she was obviously very invested in it. And she's just a really wonderful, cool person. And on a personal level, they were especially good to my son, Tom, who behaves differently. And he lives above them. He used to stop in every day and they were great with him. So when it closed, one of the wonderful things that happened was that Stephanie wrote something to all of the followers saying, hey guys, we had this for 9 years. It was terrific. But it is time now. And so, it wasn't any of the bitterness, any of the anger, any of the, like you said, any of the why me, why now. It was more, come on down for a last cup of coffee and thank you. And let's go do whatever we're going to do next. And it was
it's not the end.
Thing. Well, definitely it wasn't the end. I think on some level, it's really hard to run that kind of coffee shop. I think they were ready to give it up anyway, but there was such a level of acceptance. And even I have a picture of them on their last night with my son. They're all grinning from ear to ear, and it was very inspiring. And then the second thing I thought of was I have a friend who died in 1995. He had AIDS. And I met him in this camp that my agency ran, which was a camp for families affected by HIV/AIDS, and the whole families used to come to the camp, et cetera, et cetera. And it was staffed primarily by volunteers. So Alan was one of the volunteers. I never met anybody who was walking down the path to pretty much at that time, especially certain death, who behaved in the way that he behaves. And once at the end of camp, there used to be this get together and debriefing kind of situation. People started bitching and moaning, and it was turning into a really dark, negative thing. So he started singing. That was it. Just turned it around. And I wasn't there when he died. He died in San Francisco, but I do have a feeling that is what he did. Maybe not singing. Who knows if he was conscious, but in his head he was singing.
Yeah.
That's the way to go, right? That's the way to go. This is Satchidananda. It's one of his translations in the beginning. I always think of this. He's like, oh, we're all going to die. Can we at least die happily laughing?
Yeah. Yes.
It's like, no, you can't do that if you think that your body is the end of you. Like I see the people suffering, like this woman who owns Sip This. I've heard so many stories about her over the years. She sounds like a really special person. Like she gets life. And I think that's why they were so successful, because her consciousness permeated the space. Like she has a loveliness. And it's like, that's why she's suffering less. She must be less attached to the outcome of the work. It's like you do the work for the sake of work, and you dedicate your actions to something else, then it's like, look, she's not attached to the karma of the situation. Whatever happened in the past brought us to this place where the material is acting in this way. It's like, okay, so then what's my role in it? If my role in it is not to have this anymore, then I'm going to go do something else and probably be fine. It's like that whole attitude is so inspiring. It's so inspiring. I think this is what everyone's trying to get towards, a state of like peace in that way. And it comes from acceptance, right? And it comes from like, if I've done all this work to build my business, then I take on the business as my identity, and I can't exist without the identity of that business. And if the business is getting closed, that means I'm getting closed. It's like, it's another appropriation of who we actually are. It's like just the reflection of the banyan tree. And I've always said that. I've always said it, or you guys have heard me say, like, okay, if red burns down, then I'm just going to do something else. It means I'm not supposed to run the business anymore. And I've had to tell myself that over and over again, because when you put so much time into something, it's like you get attached to it. Mm-hmm. But then it causes you suffering. And I never wanted it to be a thing that caused me any additional suffering. But, you know, over the years, you kind of fluctuate. Like, I'm not perfect, but it was on fire, you know? Like, the moment happened where the studio was on fire, and I'm, like, laying there in bed, sort of like, what am I supposed to do now? You know, I was telling my husband, like, well, what now? You know, maybe I'm not supposed to have it anymore. And we just sat in the bed and we started laughing. It was like a good 20 minutes of just like laughing, tears running out of my eyes. Like, this is so absurd, you know? It could have been like 20 minutes of crying though, I think, if I didn't prepare myself. And I think that's what the yogis are trying to tell us all this time, like, prepare yourself. Prepare yourself for the end of your body. Prepare yourself for the end of all the things that you think you are in this life. Like, you are attached and it's causing you suffering.
Right.
Try to find non-attachment to these material things that are impermanent. You can attach yourself to what's permanent in people. And when someone passes, it's like, there's almost a easefulness of like, well, they're not over. There's this essential being that still exists forever. And that's sort of a solace.
Right, right.
Like, my grandpa died. That was the first like real death. That was the first dead body I ever saw. And we went up to the casket and my mom was standing next to me and she was like real sad. Her father passed, but she whispers in my ear, she's like, he's not in there. And I was like, oh.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And I think about that at every funeral. And every time someone passes, like, oh, they've popped off to some other place. Not in there anymore. It's just like the material. It's like the leftover sweater. It's no good anymore. We're just leaving it behind and getting a new sweater.
It's interesting because when my brother died, it wasn't the first death, but it was the closest. And this is it's now 21 years ago. When he died, I kept on saying to people, you know, my friends came and so on and so forth, and there was a wake, and it was huge and it was packed for many different reasons. But I kept on saying to them, you know, that's not him. I'm not sure what that is, but that's not him. I couldn't figure out what was saying it, you know. I think my friends wanted to say, here, sit down and drink this margarita, you know, or something, you know.
Right.
But it really felt that way, like, no, that's not him. And when my mother died, I didn't even want to see her body. You know, it was sort of like, it's not her anymore. Which caused great family strife, but you know, you got to grow up Catholic to understand that, so.
And I did, so I understand completely. I understand. There's a lot, yeah. There's a lot of grief with.
Yep.
Yeah. You know what I think of all the time? Did you guys ever used to play video games where you'd have like a certain amount of lives?
Yes.
So you're like playing the video game and you're playing with some friends and like your avatar dies and you're like, but it's not like you die, you know, you're just like the being playing the avatar and the avatar dies. Like,
very interesting.
I feel like in life we're all walking around like just playing this virtual reality game. And then when someone ends it, it's like, fuck, you know, like they're out. but it doesn't mean they're gone. They're like on the other side of the screen somewhere. Is that so immature to say? Like, this is how I think of the world.
No, but I like that. I like the avatar thought.
Can I say something?
Of
Yeah.
course.
Good morning, everybody. I wanted to share two things. In the Jewish life, the Jewish religion, you are not supposed to look at the dead body, and we have to mourn for 7 days. And when my father died in 1988, I was 20, and it was very difficult because it was kind of like you felt like he left. And now, with all the learning that I'm doing, I feel him very close, very like his soul is with me. And it is very true, Amanda, that depending on how you look at things and how you feel, like somebody's watching over you. So that's one of the aspects, that your soul should be with us all the time. And when things happen, it's like, Daddy, just watch over me or take care of me or whatever. And my mother is very good to go to the cemetery and clean the cement and the plaque and whatever. And I am the one that, yearns for his soul and his like where he is somewhere out there in the heaven. And then the other thing I wanted to share with you guys is that I was dealing with things with friendships this weekend that brought me back to my childhood about being the third wheel among friends. And I thought of you, Amanda, because I was like, I'm going back. I can't go back. I learned too much and I'm learning too much. I can't go back. And, but I feel insecurity of friendships and I'm the third wheel, they don't care, whatever. And I own it. And I was telling Micheline that I started reading, and I was reading all the books that I have to read, and completely brought me back and made me more secure. And then I said, you know what, I'm going. And I picked up the bike and I went for 10 miles, listening to some type of learning experience. And I did back and forth 10 miles, and it completely brought me back to me, to it's my perception, my feelings. It's nothing to do with them. And that was my understanding, my interpretation of how I was feeling. And I went to the lake and I was like, hey guys, I did 10 miles, and completely own it. And they're like, hi, Ceci, how are you? And I was like, good for you. And I was like, was I in my mind that I felt a third wheel, or I really felt it? And it was like kind of like centering myself in the matter, like whatever was feeling in the emotion, or I was feeling more on the spiritual level, like kind of like it was my idea, my perception, my thing, let it go. And by biking and meditating and doing exercise, it brought me back to myself and to my happy being. So I just also, like you share, Amanda, with the business, that that you'll start laughing, because it's how your support system, how you are viewing things. And I really believe that we're all here for you. We're together, and you have a community, and it's just, things shall pass, and we are here to learn something from it. I don't know what it is, but we're here to learn. God has given us this, or the superior, or whoever, that we have to, I believe, to be where we are and learn from where we are, and try to make it the best we can.
Yes, I see. That's a beautiful thought. We're like divorced from self, or we are absorbed in self, and that experience is very different of how we perceive the material world.
Yes, it is. It is crazy, because the material world can suck you in and can make you feel so sad and so depleted and so whatever. And Micheline and I were thinking that right now we went upstate and we were connected to nature, and we saw the cows or the chickens or whatever, the pigs. And it was kind of like, it brings you out of the misery, because it's like away. And is it reality? Who knows? But it was kind of like your mind is in somewhere else, and you have to work on it. And that's why we meditate. That's why we're centering, kind of trying to let go of the material world and center yourself. And I've been hearing so many good speeches about people, like we spoke about this, Amanda, before in classes, about being with money and this and that, and you're not happy. And then you can have hanging out with the pigs and you're in another world. So it really is huge, guys. You don't know how I felt. I felt like that teenager that I felt like a third wheel, and I'm old, and I was feeling that way. And I was like, no way, I can't go back. I have come such a long way. And I made myself move out. And it's true, the exercising, the yoga, the being here right now, it's a big transition. But you have to be in your mind. You have to want it. Because if you fester on the negativity, you're going to be there. But you have to want to move forward. You have to want that you're here for a reason and you're learning from it, and you have to want to move out of it. And you have to do things like gardening with Sue, like, trying to move away from, don't just keep dwelling on something. Just say, you know what, I'm here, I'm learning, I'm growing, and what can I do to get out of this mode, and just do it. And if it doesn't work, do something else. So that's what I have learned from yoga and from being in this space right now, guys. So thank you.
Yeah. Can I mention something? Because
Yes.
what you said about, like, I don't want to give incomplete information about certain stuff when I'm talking. Like, I think that's how spiritual bypassing happens, where we're like, well, no, it's just the material. I think that there is a point where we are existing in a material body, and the material body has, you're in the whole psychology field, so I'm sure you'll get this. Like, the material body has its experience, and it has its reaction to things. So, like, when I think about grief, because, like, some people experience death differently, like according to your outcome, right? Like, according to your outlook on life. Like, if you really innately feel that someone's just, like, passing on to the ether, and, like, it doesn't change the fact that you had a relationship with that body mind, and this may be the last, well, it is the last time that they'll ever have this life, right? They're going to move on to some other life, which is, like, reassuring in a certain aspect. But, like, there's always a grief period where you have to move through the stages of grief.
Yes.
And that's a part of the yogic path too, like acknowledging the physical form, which includes the mind, having its experience of grief, of moving through the stages of grief.
I agree.
So it's like, it's nuanced, right? Because it's like, there's the spirit knowing something and really understanding something deeply, but also the spirit living in the vehicle and being subject to the waves of the vehicle going back and forth. Like, that's why yoga is presented to us as a system. It's like, okay, you had all this karma and this conditioning that brought you to the point where you were perceiving a certain situation a certain way. And it's like, there has to be a moment of, like, okay, this is what my body mind is experiencing right now. Like, a sense of, okay, like, not a forcing away, you know what I mean? There's almost like there's a sort of sect of the spiritual community who are like, I'm not going to let myself feel anything anymore. Or I'm not going to let my body mind feel anything anymore. I'm going to push it away. I'm not saying you're doing this, Ceci. I'm just, like, bringing it up for anybody who listens. We have some subscribers on YouTube.
Right.
Now. But, like, the idea is you have to simultaneously have that deeper knowledge of who you are and the fortitude to be able to endure the experience of the body mind.
I agree.
And whatever it's going through. And then the wisdom of where you're going to decidedly take that next. Like, you had a moment and you're like, is this me, or is this the conditioned response that my mind is having right now? I'm going to take myself out of the situation. I'm going to, remind myself of who I am. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to read some texts. And that's like you're just going through the yamas and niyamas.
Yes,
it's amazing.
yes,
like,
yes. You know what?
Like, you have tapas,
Amanda,
dedication.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting you said that, because when you're in the moment, you suffer, you hate, you why did you do this? Why, all you go through all the emotions. But because this emotion that I felt this weekend, I already felt it years ago, and I dealt with it for so long, it was familiar with me. So I think when you don't have familiarity on something, then you're like, this is new and you don't know what to do with it. And that's what you go through the process. And that's why you're like, wait a second, I'm feeling angry. My father left me, you know, abandonment and all this. Yes, it's all the, I forget the, it's like a whole psychological process. You're 100% right. But, you know, we're talking about 30 years later, feeling the emotions that I felt when I was a teenager, it made me unaware. It's like, wait, I felt this before. I don't, it's an insecurity thing. It's a whatever. I mean, you speak much better than me, but it's a feeling that you have. And you're like, wait a second, I recognize this. So I was able to recognize it. I said, I don't want to do this again. This is my emotion, my feelings, my insecurities, or whatever I was feeling. And I tried to redirect, but believe me, it has been years that I've been dealing with it. So it's a learning experience. It's not just you clap and you go, okay, I'm okay. You know, this is so beautiful. Okay, I'm going to be beautiful. No, it really, I worked on it for years. So the tapping into something that I recognize when I dealt with it 30 years ago, I was able to do that. But I dwelled for several days, and I told my husband, here I am, back again to the feelings of being third wheel, or, you know, they don't want me, or, you know, it's not necessary, whatever feeling I had. But I recognized it and I worked on it. I acknowledged it and I applied all the things that I have learned to be able to move on. But it wasn't easy. I'm not saying that one day, you know, you're like, okay, it's all good. No, you have to emotionally, consciously be aware, recognize it, go through it, and try to move out and do things to help you. Because they say, like, when somebody's angry, you go, okay, get over it. You're like, forget it, like, right. But if like they get you angry more, like, leave me alone. I'm like, right. But if you say, breathe, you know, do some exercise, because then the chemical, the physical, the hormones kick in, and that's what is able to do it. Not consciously that you're like, okay, get it over with. No, it's a physical inner change that you go through things. That's how I'm feeling. And then little by little, and then after you start feeling good about yourself because of the hormones and the endorphins and all that kick in, then you start thinking, yeah, you know what? I'm feeling better. This is just my conscious. This is my thinking. And then you start moving, and then you're like, start crying, because like, it's just an emotion. And I mean, it's a whole, and Amanda can explain it better. It's just a whole thing that sometimes people cannot consciously say, okay, I'm done. But you have to help your body sometimes to go through the process of learning and growing. And the work that we do on the mat is huge, because it deals with hormones and endorphins and all that good stuff, and then kicks in, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm feeling better, I'm feeling happier, and you're feeling hot, and you're feeling like relief, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, let me think about this. Why am I feeling this way? And that's how the consciousness and all this stuff kicks in, and then you start figuring out things. So, but again, it took me for years. So here I am saying all these things, but ladies, I worked very hard on it, and it took me years to get where I am, and I am very grateful.
There's a whole shift, right? Like, I used to not be able to go to wakes, and I would go and stay in the back, like the furthest back wall, and then finding that that's not the person, that person's not there. It made it easy, and it just, I mean, it was the same thing as Ceci's saying, years of work, and like, but now I'm able to go to a body, and the past 2 years, there's been a lot of close deaths, and allowing, like, remembering the importance that we're human and we gotta go through the motions of grief, and creating and really allowing the space to find that is so, so important, rather than, oh, just let it go, it's done, what are you gonna do about it? Like, shove it in there.
You see, I'm all emotional now. So yeah, it's I am so blessed to be here, and I count my blessings every day. Even though you have hard times in life, you just have to pick up, you just remember what's good, and because there are people that are suffering, and you always have to be grateful for the little things that God gave you, or life gives you, or your family, or yourself. And like, it was so funny, because my family is so proud of me for achieving and getting where I am. Like I put myself, like before I took my yoga training, people go, oh, you can do it. I'm like, no, I can't. I remember meeting Michelin. I'm like, no, I can't do this. It's too much. And she's like, Ceci, just be here, try. I said, but I don't even know what downward dog is. So she's like, just plug in. And I plugged in every Sunday. I was such a commitment, and I can't tell you. And this is not just to Amanda, not because you're here, but I want to tell you that it just has been an amazing journey. And every time I read something else, and it's just an awakening, and you know, I got emotional talking, and it is true. It's a journey, and don't look at the end. It just enjoy and learn from what you're going through. It's just keep, like when I was younger, I always say, okay, I'm going to find the final. And yes, I went, Pam can be testify on this. Like I flipped out because it was a final. I had to memorize it. And I got scared because of my childhood time. And I just start reading every day and memorizing and working or whatever. And just a journey and trying to be better person, better. And it was funny because my husband goes, are you going to do what they did to you? Or are you going to try to get better and be better? I'm like, oh my goodness, yes, I will be better than them. So sometimes when people are not nice, do you want to emulate that, or you want to be a better person? And it's true, you have to be a better person. And sometimes when you help others, you forget about yourself. So it's just a whole, like a little rubber band with a lot of rubber bands all around it. And then you don't see any rubber band in the ball. You see a ball. You don't see all these thousands of rubber bands that you've been doing throughout to make a ball of. Have you ever seen that ball of rubber bands? So it's like analogy, like you see one rubber band, one at a time, and then little by little, the ball keeps growing. And then the whole ball, it works together. It's like a community. Oh, that's a cute one. So it's a community. And then you throw the ball. You don't see that it's 100, thousands of rubber bands. You just see a ball coming to you. So that's what I'm thinking. It's like, wow, it's a community. It's your family, your group, your people around you that either can bring you down or bring you up. And if they bring you down, just say, you know what, that's their life, and go up. And if somebody that encourages, just take them with you and just say, thank you for the encouragement. So it goes both ways. So God bless you guys.
It's 8:27.
Yes, we need to move on. Thank you, Seth.
Oh,
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for letting me share.
Let's find a comfortable place to sit, and we'll do some alternate nostril breathing to center before we move into meditation. So find somewhere comfortable with a tall spine, or if you're choosing to lie down, that's fine too. Take a deep breath in and a full deep breath out. Using the right hand to close off your nostrils. You're going to use the right thumb to close off the right nostril and the right ring finger to close off the left nostril. Begin breathing in through the left nostril. Close both. Exhale right. Inhale right. Close both. Exhale left. Inhale left. Close both. Exhale right. Inhale right. Close both. Exhale left. Inhale left. Close both. Exhale right. Inhale right. Close both. Exhale left. Continue like that at your own pace for as many rounds as you feel you need to before you enter into your meditation or concentration practice this morning. Making sure that you end the practice, the breathing practice, breathing out of the left nostril. I'll set the timer for 20 minutes and bring us back together at the end of that time. Gently bringing your awareness back to the room, bringing your hands to your heart, bowing your head. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ceci.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Nice to
You
see
too.
you, everybody.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you for sharing, everybody.
Tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.